it's a bit of a shortcut to think AI non-deterministic. We need to be deterministic, so we shouldn't use AI for that. I think the right analogy is AI has the ability to replace human beings on certain tasks or help human beings augment them. Yeah. So it's not about replacing everything that people are doing. But in terms of analogy, it's really about building an agent that can behave and think and act exactly like a human being would do. So for instance, your platform engineer or your DevOps engineer working for you is actually non-deterministic. Humans are non-deterministic.
Humans are non-deterministic, right?
Yeah.
This is the Agentic DevOps podcast. I'm your host, Bret Fisher, and today I have my guest, Sam Alba of Mendral on. Sam goes way back. One of the early devs at Docker, co-founder of Dagger, and now co-founder of Mendral. So he's been focused on cloud native and now agentic products for 15 plus years at least. And this is a wide-ranging conversation. We mostly focus on Mendral, the tool. And the elevator pitch, I guess, that I would give is this tool currently looks at GitHub. It's focused on GitHub Actions right now, but GitHub as a platform, particularly on Actions and the workflows and the events that happen there, but not just Actions. And it tries to act like a DevOps junior engineer, essentially. It's one of the closest, if not the closest thing I have had as someone who focuses on GitHub Actions and CI in there and just administrating and managing that platform for DevOps teams in particular. It feels like the closest thing to an AI buddy that is constantly looking at my GitHub, finding problems, not necessarily in the code that the application developers are making, but in everything else around it. The linters, the testing infrastructure, the GitHub Action workflows and those pipelines that are happening in there, the logging events, anything misconfigured in security, the Dependabot and Renovate stuff, like just all the stuff that is focused around the code for managing the platform, for storing code, running workflows and automations on that code, and then eventually shipping it. They operate in this middle space between the developers and the production deployments in infrastructure. And I think that's a sweet spot for me. Like that's exactly what I wanted to talk to Sam about. And we spend quite some time digging into the use cases for this thing. I actually run through some of my own experiences because they onboarded me to the platform over a month ago. So I've been using this thing irregularly, but as a single operator of over 100 repos now in my own GitHub. Some of those are actual infrastructure, things in production for my own use, but also a lot of examples for my courses, a lot of demos and sample tools and sample code that I have to manage. And I treat this like my operations, right? So I'm doing the Dependabot, I'm doing the security reviews of things, I'm automating things with GitHub Actions. So while I'm not necessarily the picturesque large team managing large, big projects on there, I do operate my own little business of one. I operate that in a very similar fashion, and I need help. I need a lot more DevOps help than I admit because I need to operate my business, and I don't necessarily have time to manage the platform automation stuff around my code. And that's really the problem I think that Mendral's trying to go after. So we break down what it does, what they're doing as an early stage startup. They just graduated YC. And we then get into even more details around AI. And because they're building today and they're graduating just a few weeks ago from Y Combinator, they are one of these new AI companies that are building with AI. They're using AI in the product, and their product ships AI features to us as the users of it. So they're kind of the triple threat of AI. So we lean into that a little bit, talking about what they're using AI for, what they see for the future of their product. How do we go experience these things in the future where we're all operating our own AI harnesses to manage our agents like Claude Code and Open Code and whatnot? How do we use this tool in the future? Anyway, we get into all that. It's a great conversation. I was excited to have it. And we went on so long that I, at some point, just had to say, okay, we're going to have to stop talking and make this another episode because we could have gone for hours, I believe, on this. So please enjoy this episode with Sam Alba of Mendral. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Bret. Thanks for inviting me. So yeah, we started this new company, Mendral. We are now building an AI DevOps engineer. We basically see that, the emergence of coding agents and how they are shaping the future of CI/CD and software delivery. And so we're building an agent that can unblock Steam. And now, thanks to AI, we can automate certain things that we could not automate before. And so today we have an agent that monitors and fixes some of the software delivery issues, flaky tests, slow builds, broken release processes.
So let's get into it because for the audience, Sam and I talked, I don't know, a couple of months ago at least, I think, and we had talked about Mendral. I'm building GitHub Actions courses and content, and I've been a GitHub Actions consultant for probably half a decade at least or more. I think Actions, I argue, is like the most popular, certainly for open source, but the most popular CI platform. I'm just kind of going to call it automation platform from now on because people do a lot more than just CI in there and deployments and stuff. Solomon had clued me into you all because we were staying in touch around Dagger and that's still going. We started talking about your focus and it felt like a tool that I should have in my toolbox. It also felt like something where typically with large platforms, just like a cloud platform like AWS or Google Cloud, GitHub Actions is a very raw platform to me. I feel like it's got a lot of features, it's got a lot of sharp edges, but it also stops short of what a team typically needs out of everything automation. And we all talk about private runners and we talk about sometimes like custom dashboards or, org level statistics and awareness, more observability into GitHub Actions. Those are common questions. And I don't often have great stories for that because I think that market historically, where people have tried to have very niche little products, but pre-AI that solved a little pain point for GitHub Actions. One, GitHub Actions wasn't quite as popular 5 years ago, right? It hadn't rose to prominence. Everyone was still very much Jira and Travis and a lot of the other ones. And at the same time, there wasn't the popularity, but these tools, since they were pre-AI, they were very limited, I feel like, in the things that they could help with. And so I saw personally little companies starting out, like little hobby projects that almost felt like they weren't true. They weren't YC Combinator companies trying to come out and be actually a full-fledged company. They were more like side projects. And someone figured out, I could spin up runners faster, which is like a whole new segment of the market where there's now many companies that host your runners for you and they're faster and cheaper and better. And then we've had little companies experiment with like GUIs or web dashboards that do more than what you might get out of the basics of GitHub Actions there. When we walked through yours, I was very excited about it because rarely on this podcast, after we're about to hit 200 episodes of this and the DevOps and Docker talk, and rarely is there something there, especially in the Kubernetes land, that I feel like is meant for me. That's something that solves my problems, even as a solo developer and as a consulting DevOps engineer. So could you talk a little bit about like when you both said, hey, look, we're going to start this whole new company because we believe this is the right time for this thing. Like, where was your headspace? What problems were you trying to solve?
Yeah, so CI is a really broad area. You actually mentioned it. It's not exactly for just running your test. It's more like a workflow engine. It's a lot about orchestration and automation. And we do a lot of things in CI. CI was always a bottleneck. Every time, you have teams, as soon as you have some CIs, you start with some workflows like a linter, a builder on your GitHub Actions or some other CI systems. And CI is always a bottleneck because, first of all, it's a central place for integration and for running your tests when you ship your code. When we started Dagger, we wanted to help people with this bottleneck, building programming tools so engineers could actually solve their CI issues more efficiently. When we started this new company, Mendral, Andrew and I saw an opportunity to finally automate certain things that we could not automate before AI. For instance, there are some release processes that you need to run manually. Every team that's growing has some sort of manual operations in their release process. And on the other side, they have issues that they don't spend time on fixing because it's never the priority. You want to build your product. You don't want to build your CI. And the problem is these problems are piling up. That bottleneck is even getting bigger with AI because now you have coding agents that push a lot of code to your CI system. And so the problem, this bottleneck that was already a problem is getting worse. And it's only the beginning. And so we thought that now we have the tools now the problem is bigger. On one side, there is more demand for it. And on the other side, we finally have the tools, thanks to AI, to solve those problems efficiently. So the idea with Mendral is not so much to make your CI better and equip developers. It's actually to replace that work, to automate that work entirely so those developers can focus on their applications. So that's really the TLDR of why we started that. And obviously, software delivery and CI/CD in general is really broad. There is security involved. There is, quality control, regression testing, like a lot of things goes through CI. And so we started initially by building an agent and a data platform really that looks at everything that's going on your CI system, the logs, the code changes, the past incidents, all of the events, the behavior of the team, like all of those data. And then we started to build specific agents on top. And so that's really what we are building with Mendral. Right now, we have a lot of, when we started YC, we didn't know exactly we had a working MVP, but we didn't know what would be interesting for people. We end up spending a lot of time fixing flaky tests and, reliability problems. We have some teams actually using the agent to improve the performance of their CI, like for instance, implement sharding strategies on top of their pipelines to have some parallelization, and so they can ship faster because the CI can complete in a shorter amount of time. There are also some teams using us for security reasons. Like for instance, our agent is looking at security alerts, look at the CVE, see if it's exploitable on your code base, auto-remediate if needed. So there are really things that you would expect a senior DevOps engineer to do for you. And some of those teams actually don't have specific roles for that. So they use the agent like it's a person.
Yeah. I think I've been in tech for 30 years. 20 of those years, I've been dealing with some sort of code management system, and that doesn't always have an automation system built. Like we didn't always have something like GitHub where the automation system and the code storage system were the same thing. But I'm just thinking back, and I don't know a time where I would agree that the CI or the automation system for code was a first-class citizen in the team. It always feels like it's the I don't know if this is an American phrase, the redheaded stepchild. Like it always felt like it was just barely working. And especially when it came to Jenkins, we're not sure if we could exactly we don't know how long it would take to recover from a server failure. Sometimes those servers are under someone's desk. Sometimes those servers are unique, often, especially with Jenkins, not to pick on it, but it was the most popular and it was self-hosted. So you always had these special snowflakes of servers that were built typically by developers, not usually by ops, where the professional sysadmins were operating, right? Where they were the ones creating systems to manage and control servers. But often I would walk in and find the dev team had their special CI thing, and it might be running on someone's machine. It might be under the desk. It might be in the closet. And those days, I think because we're pretty much all using at least some sort of cloud API for managing our automation, and we might have runners in different places, but we're leaning into the more cloud stuff. Although it's amazing how much I still see Jenkins and talk to people that are still using Jenkins. I often look at this as like, we have needed tools like this for so long to help clean up to me, it's like the janitor, because while you're saying you're building the DevOps engineer, I know that every DevOps team wish they had another DevOps engineer to help them. And I feel like right now, and at least in this moment in AI, management seems to think that they're going to be reducing the number of DevOps engineers, not increasing them. I just recently launched something called the Agentic DevOps Guild for people, personal plug. But this is a membership program where DevOps engineers are coming in to help accelerate their AI learning, onboard AI tooling. And I do these onboarding calls. And so for the last 3 weeks, I've been having multiple calls with engineers as they come onto the program. And one theme that's maybe not a majority yet, but it's a consistent theme is DevOps engineers are worried of the unreasonable expectations of their management to do magic. And they don't even know these tools yet, right? Tools like Mendral that run on top of maybe an AI infrastructure. They don't yet know Claude code. They're just dipping their toes into Copilot sometimes. I think operators and DevOps engineers are maybe a little bit behind application software developers in terms of their expectations to onboard development or coding tools for AI. And of course, just 6 months ago, I was talking to people at KubeCon. They were saying, well, we're never going to put AI into infrastructure management because that's non-deterministic and we need full determinism. And yet, when I use your tool, which feels like, I don't actually know your architecture, we'll get into that, but it feels like there's AI in the background. I'm writing I'm editing plans for execution with it in human language, right? Like I'm not checking boxes. I'm talking. I feel like I'm writing back and forth. I'm not literally chatting, but I'm writing a plan, helping it edit the plan so that it executes properly. I'm writing paragraphs of sort of my rules for how it should do certain things in infrastructure. So it feels very AI based, even though I'm not literally chatting with the chatbot yet. But at the same time, I feel like DevOps engineers are just in this unfortunate situation right now. We're getting hit from all sides. We're expected to keep operating our understaffed, janitored, or caretaked infrastructure, right? Our struggling infrastructure. We're worried that we're going to have less staff here pretty soon. We haven't yet completely consumed all the AI madness that the app developers have, because we know that basically we're one prompt away from production going down, because we typically have the keys to the kingdom, and a lot of teams have keys that, I was just talking to one of the engineers onboarding that said, I have the Terraform keys on my machine. I have all the production AWS and Kube Control keys on my machine. I need to learn how to sandbox this AI agent, or if it does one thing wrong, I'm probably losing my job, right? And that just feels much higher stakes than an app developer that got the wrong font on something and has to recommit a new PR. It just feels higher stakes for all of us in the operations realm. So that all being said, it feels like you've kind of nailed it without sounding like too much of a fanboy yet, but it feels like you're solving a problem for me. And so for the audience, over the last week, I've actually been working with the team to try to get more of my problems solved. I mean, I have over 100 repos. The majority of those are training repos or example repos for learning Docker, Kubernetes, GitHub Actions. So there's lots of sample code, but it's app code, right? There's lots of sample GitHub Actions, Kube Control, YAML, like all sorts of various infrastructure stuff. I have an impossible time to keep, I cannot keep up with all of it. I can't even keep up with the NPM updates, much less, CVE scans, failed linting jobs, failed test runs. There's just so much stuff that's happening in the background. I basically ignore it until it becomes a problem for my students or somebody bugs me in an issue. And I feel like finally with Mendral, from a user's perspective, it's giving me an opportunity to shortcut that. It doesn't fully automate everything for me yet. So I want to ask about that, like where your vision's at, but it doesn't fully automate, it doesn't solve all my problems automatically. It just feels like it's raising the stakes of what's more important for me, and not to get distracted on the stupid stuff that I might not need to worry about because they're not really an issue. They're just, a failed linting job isn't as important as a failed test job. So it's nice that it elevates things that are real important, and it also rolls things up. It's like, if you have this issue 100 times in 100 repos, maybe you fix that one first. And so where do you see all of this going? If this thing is helping, if it's giving intelligence and insight, is it what I feel like it's doing to the failures that I have in my automation platform? Is this thing eventually learning from me, and is it going to start solving some of these automatically? Where do you see that going?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And there is also a lot to say about what you said earlier about deterministic and non-deterministic, and the use of AI in pipelines that are deterministic, actually. And so really briefly, I'll explain, just for context, how Mendral is behaving and how the product works. And so usually teams on board with a single GitHub app install, one click, and then we start ingesting all the CI logs and events on our platform. And we basically run the agent in such a way that the agent can see everything that's going on your CI. It's like someone looking at your logs, your events, your code changes, everything that's going on, and looks for opportunity to be helpful. You mentioned the linter failing. That's one. Can be one of your pipeline is slower by 30% this week, and it was faster last week. Why? It can be GitHub is down. What's going on? Everything is broken. The agent actually is able to spot these kind of problems and tell the team, don't worry, the GitHub is down, it will come back. It's not you. They are looking for many opportunities to be helpful. The problem with most AI tools is that, people tell you, oh, it can do anything, it's very powerful, but you still have to find the right thing that you need to ask to the chatbot. One of the key architecture when we started to build the product was that we didn't want to give yet another dashboard, yet another chatbot to people. And that's why it's an agent that joins your Slack and start working for you exactly like a human being would do. One thing that's important to keep in mind is it's not, for me, it's a bit of a shortcut to think AI non-deterministic and we need to be deterministic, so we shouldn't use AI for that. I think the right analogy is AI has the ability to replace human beings on certain tasks or help human beings, augment them. We have some of our customers who already have DevOps engineers and big platform teams, and actually they have Mendral joining that team and augmenting them. Yeah. So it's not about replacing everything that people are doing. But in terms of analogy, it's really about building an agent that can behave and think and act exactly like a human being would do. So for instance, your platform engineer or your DevOps engineer working for you is actually non-deterministic. Humans are
right. Humans are non-deterministic, right?
Yeah, and their output and the work they do can be deterministic. Like the example of a linter, like your linter breaks. We have to understand the mistake, what's the problem, why it broke. All of that can be done by AI. Then fixing the linter and pushing a PR, that can be totally deterministic. So the way Mendral works today is we didn't push the cursor too far in terms of automation because we care a lot about security. Like we have fairly large teams using the agent in production. And so we're very cautious about the kind of changes we make because the agent actually has the capability to open PRs and push code to people's repos. And so what we do is the agent will ask every time when it wants to do something, it will ask for the permission. So you have to confirm that, yes, you can go ahead and implement that. Yes, you can go ahead and do this or that. Over time, we have people asking us more and more to actually automate more. So if the level of confidence of the agent is greater than, let's say, 85%, I want a PR to be automatically, because we actually have a pretty high merge rate from the pull request that Mendral opens to the pull requests that are accepted by teams. And the reason for that is because we have fairly long coding sessions. So when the agent implements something, it's fairly similar to what Cloud Code or Cursor would do. But the main difference is that it will wait for the CI to complete, wait for the logs to show up, and actually wait for the confirmation it actually fixed the problem. So if it's fixing your linter, it will wait to confirm. The agent itself will wait to get the confirmation that the problem was solved before saying, yes, okay, my PR is ready. Exactly like a human being would do, right? And so that's the main thing. But yeah, over time, like we're going to push for more automation and we're going to do a lot more. You asked also about the learning phase. That one is actually very interesting. I don't know if you want to react to what I just said or if I should expand on the learning aspect.
Yeah, let's talk about the learning.
So on the learning side, what's very important, exactly like when someone joins your team, that the person doesn't have context. So you will start by watching the team, joining the team, making themselves useful, right? But then over time, the person will gain knowledge on a lot of things, problems, the tools, the best practices, and then it will get better and better. Same thing with the agent. So the agent, when it sees something that needs to be remediated, or if it sees problems, it can identify patterns and maintain a list of what we call insights. There are basically opportunities for the agent to do something. Can be a failure, can be a performance regression, security alerts, etc. All of that is being tracked by the agent and constantly being refreshed with new data. That's why, for instance, if it spots a problem the first time, the level of confidence on the resolution might be low. And then as the problem appears several times, the level of confidence will get higher to the point that we can entirely automate the resolution. And that happens based on the agent being able to constantly update this living memory and taking that into account whenever it is a problem. So when it sees the problem, it doesn't just look at the problem and the logs. It sees at all the context of the problems that happened before. It has the ability to look at, similar issues or similar patterns that it saw in the past. And I can dig into the implementation of that because it's actually quite interesting how we architected this agent. But then also the team sometimes talk to the agent on Slack and say, oh, whoa, you did that, but we actually don't do that. Actually, let's say, we always follow that best practice, or we always use this tool, or we always do this. And basically people react to the agent and say, hey, Mendral, you keep in mind we do this and not that. And the agent also has a memory system and maintains its memory. You can also review the memories and edit them, etc. But yeah, the idea is to make that learning part totally automated so the team doesn't have to care about what the agent knows and what it does not. And so that's really the key part about the non-deterministic way. I think the right way to frame it is really think about what a human would do and think about the fact that an LLM can resonate and navigate through problems in the same way. And so that's really what makes this kind of automation possible today. And it was not before LLMs were good enough.
Yeah. And it's subtle. The more I feel like we're spending leaning into just trying to use AI in various scenarios, the more I feel like my mind expands to understand where it actually could apply to things that I didn't even think about. Like I feel like to me, Mendral, the premise to a non-AI, what I would call a blue pillar. I keep a blue pill and red pill matrix 25-year-old dated reference, but the blue pill people would be the ones who were not necessarily anti-AI, but very, very much not pro-AI. They're not leaning in hard. They're like, yeah, it might help me with my code completion, but I'm not looking to put AI everywhere. And that's fine. There's people like that. And then there's the red pillars. And I used to consider myself the blue, and now I'm basically all red, and I'm looking for new opportunities. And in this use case where we're saying, okay, yeah, it's going to be helpful in CI. At first, when you have this 3 or 4 years of experience of hallucinating agents and things going crazy, that sounds like a wild premise. But what I find is interesting, and I'm using this also in my own work with things like Claude Code and Open Code, and learning how skills and other new patterns that us humans are using to help guide the AI, give it more context, give it more guardrails so that it won't hallucinate. And when, like you said, we get to like the 85% trust level, we get to this certain level of trust, particularly with a certain model or a certain harness. And then we start to relax. And I've noticed recently, like even my prompts are getting sloppier. Like I'm not prompt engineering anymore, right? Where we were consumed with that a year ago, where you got to have the best prompt. The only way you're going to get a good, reliable AI is the best prompt. And you go to these websites and they have all these listed prompts. And now I'm just like, hey, can you fix that? I'm very vague. I'm very casual, like I would to an employee. But for me, I know that's because I'm consistently using skills, which are these large documents full of context, and that I'm operating on larger and larger, whether we want to call it context or memory or sessions, whatever. And the AIs, I'm continuing to use the same session, which it compresses and I expand it and it compresses. What I'm finding in my AI conversations is I'm able to stick with the same conversation, the same session much longer, because now we have Claude Code with 1 million token context now. And that just unlocks, I feel like for me, I mean, yes, I'm using more tokens because I'm in the same session. So I'm not a Ralph loop fanatic where I'm constantly dumping context and starting fresh. But I find that I'm actually able to have these conversations that extend for more than a few days, but into weeks. And it remembers the thing that I told it 2 weeks ago. And that's where it starts, I think, to get really, really interesting. And that feels a little bit like what I'm playing around with Mendral. I wanted to call out one feature that I just started playing with a couple of days ago. And this very specific problem of we've got so much, what's the term we use for teams that have all the canon inside their brains and it's not documented? I'm trying to think it's not lore. It's tribal knowledge. Okay. So I heard that a while ago and I love that term, tribal knowledge. Yeah. Like these are the things that you onboard that new DevOps engineer, and they're not going to just read docs. They're going to make mistakes. And then the team member is going to say, oh, no, we don't do it like that. This is what we do. I ran into that where it wasn't documented in any of my agent files yet. It wasn't anywhere in my code or documented that when I run Superlinter, particularly against GitHub Actions, because since I'm teaching GitHub Actions, consulting in GitHub Actions, I'm all into that. And I've always been very concerned with the security side of it. And now that we've had a rough year, GitHub Actions has had a rough year. This last year has not been kind to the GitHub team in terms of security attacks. I'm not even going to call them vulnerabilities. I'm just going to call them sharp edges and misconfigurations a lot of times, because it turns out they're not hacking GitHub. They're just finding people that didn't configure things correctly on an open source repo. And this is all happening. So I'm always scanning my GitHub Actions. I use ActionLint and I use something called Zizmore. I think that's how you say it. Zizmore. And Zizmore is very focused on security stuff. And so down this rabbit hole, I'm going to go with you for a second. But what was happening was they added a new rule to the linter that says from now on, you need all of your actions need to be pinned, which for those of you out there, if you're using GitHub Actions, hey, if you don't know about pinning, I've got a bunch of videos and courses on that. Like you absolutely should be pinning all your actions. And rightfully so, now the linter warns me that when I'm not doing it. And in reusable workflows, there is a pattern that surfaces with teams where if they're controlling the reusable workflow, they don't tend to pin to the SHA hash from their calling workflows because they control everything centrally from the reusable workflow. And that's the point of them, is to centrally control things so that we don't have 100 different repos that I have to update every time a different workflow changes. And so this security tool doesn't know that. Mendral doesn't know that. That is not documented anywhere in any of my systems. It's not in my Notion. It's not in my repos. So that's tribal knowledge. And what I was able to do is it was flagging a bunch of these things and saying, hey, Mendral was thinking the fix to this is that it needs to pin the SHA. But in my team of one, the real fix is, no, we need to just write an ignore rule for the Zizmor linter. And that's very specific to my workflow, not something that other people would know. And so I could give, instead of making that documented somewhere and then somehow connecting some MCP in some convoluted way to let Mendral know, it has this memory feature where I can just sort of dump in this tribal knowledge and just copy and paste, or writing in stories, basically user stories. That helps it guide the decision of how it's going to treat future failures, because what was the outcome was happening. And sorry for the audience, this is a really long story, but I feel like it's very tactical and relevant as an example, is in that scenario, if I had a junior engineer, I would say, okay, please write we're going to need to update all of these calling workflows with 100 repos now need this new line inside of the GitHub action for this particular calling workflow that calls a reusable. And then from now on, everyone in the team needs to know we don't SHA pin on our calling workflows. We only SHA pin on the reusables. And with Mendral, I was able to put it in one memory, and I haven't seen the outcome yet, but I'm going to ask you, in theory, I guess that means that from now on, every time Mendral sees this error, its new PR plan that it's going to give me isn't going to say, hey, I'm just going to replace this with a SHA hash. It's going to say, oh, I'm going to put in a new rule. I'm going to basically ignore this in the Zizmor linter so that we know that this is okay and we don't flag it. Is that kind of the expected outcome of that?
Yeah, that's right. There are many ways you can influence the behaviors of the agent today. And yes, indeed, you can actually create a memory. It makes sense when there is a pattern that you want to be widespread and apply everywhere. The sticky note that you want to put on the desk of your engineer that you want to make sure that is never forgotten. Another thing you can do is, for instance, let's say you want to migrate or to implement some sort. Let's say you have this new linter that you want to migrate from an old one, or you want to implement a new security tool or something like that. So again, the outcome will be deterministic, but asking that will be certain more likely done in a non-deterministic way. Maybe there are some things that you don't know, like for instance, the agent has the ability to do a web search or like look into best practices or things like that. And so what you can do is also ask the agent, hey, this is my plan, this is what I noticed, and this is a problem for me, I'd like to address it. The agent will actually create an insight for it and track it and propose an implementation when the level of confidence is high enough. And it has also the ability to update findings. So sometimes the agent, you talk about tribal knowledge. There is also some of that tribal knowledge and our own experience as engineer with Andrea and Olivier into the agent itself. So we constantly change the way Mendral does stuff, and that's why it feels magical sometimes when people on board with it, because what they actually don't realize is the agent has our own experiences hard-coded in some of the sub-agents that we wrote. And so you can actually influence that too, and the agent has the ability to update its own insights based on your input. So if there are certain things you disagree with, because let's say, if you would hire me as a DevOps engineer, I have certain things I would like to do. And you're like, well, no, actually, Sam, I'm paying you, so I need you to do it this way instead. Right. You can ask Mendral the same thing, and it will be fine. So yeah, the customizability is important, because that's the kind of control you need from someone you would hire as well, right? You expect this person to bring your experience, but also you have your own requirements. So yeah, that's something we constantly improve and make available to teams.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing where, testing tools have this problem, linting tools have this problem, really any tool, but I think like those are the two areas where maybe the linters might be the worst, where when something new is added, a new rule to a linter, I think I had another tool recently, actually, well, that was a NeoVim tool. I had a NeoVim tool that completely refactored. It's like everybody's refactoring all their apps now with AI. So it broke a lot of things, and I spent an hour on it, and AI was able to solve it so much faster. Not related. That was just something that happened yesterday. because I mean, the stories, if someone's like in the trenches as a DevOps engineer, that scenario that I gave, while it's just a linter, not inherently high stakes, it wasn't a testing failure or a production deployment failure or anything. But that's the kind of thing when I work with DevOps teams, that's the toil, right? That's the thing that they don't want to have to go change literally 100 repos of microservices and backend things because they've implemented some sort of central reusable workflow. But now the crux of all that is they have this thing everywhere and something breaks and now they don't have the tooling to update. They basically end up spending days writing scripts to create the PRs in 100 different repos to fix and then automate the creation of the commit, creation of the PR, the acceptance of the PR, and then the merging of the PR because they don't want to literally spend 3 or 4 days just mindlessly clicking through 100 repos to do this. And I've lost count of how many times I've watched teams go through this toil of like, your week is going to be fixing a stupid linter rule across 50 to 100 repos because the dev teams don't want to do it or whatever, or it's now our job to do it for some reason, even though we're not the application engineers. Sometimes I have worked with teams where it's the DevOps engineers literally implementing the linting rules for the software engineers. I don't know why that happens, but sometimes we get saddled with work that's not ours. But that automation part, I feel like is another, it's almost like a hidden feature that we talk about raising issues. We talk about helping understand the nuance of things and the patterns that you're seeing so that it can be more intelligent. But at the very end of this really is all about, to me, saving the toil of manually checking repos for things, because constantly struggling with workflow failures that aren't rising to the top, because when you have a big enough team, you've always got workflows running. You're just constantly inundated with workflows. And the challenge is the alert fatigue in Slack or whatever tool you're using, because you just can't keep up. So you start to say, okay, well now linter failures, we're no longer alert into Slack. So now we're going to just remove those from Slack. We're too busy to do that. Now we're only going to deal with deployment failures or only testing failures on these particular repos. Like you end up having to force yourself to ignore a whole series of problems because you just can't handle, there's just too much work. And to me, the more exciting thing is that I might be able, and maybe someday, I don't know if it does it today, if it would be able to go and simply apply 100 PRs for that particular calling workflow because I name it the same thing everywhere. But my hope is that someday, if not today, like that would be able to get automated so that I could just be done. Like basically 100 PRs later, it's taken 30 minutes or something. I didn't have to write a script. I didn't have to worry about nuking or breaking some repos because I wrote the wrong script. I can give that to Mendral, which is exciting for me.
Yeah, I can tell you more actually about that because there are a lot of things we're working on today actually that some of it actually might be available by the time this podcast is out. So
okay.
Yeah, we're working quite fast on those things because there is a lot of demand for it. As soon as people onboarded the agents and they see the value that it can unblock thanks to the data layer and which usually we refer to with the agent harness, which is kind of the combination of the tools and the context and the way we build that and keep the agent accurate at any given time. Actually, this is really the key. But yeah, in terms of what works today, so the agent is not stuck with one repo. Sometimes in CI, when you have you use products, you realize that a repo maps to a project that could sometimes map to a team. Some companies do it this way. And the issue is, well, it's great when you have, that mapping is great and works fine and you're okay with those boundaries. Problem is most teams are not. And sometimes having a repo is just an implementation detail. And exactly like you said, you want to think about something you would apply to all of your repos, all of your codes. You don't need to think about this repo it should behave like this or like that, etc. TLDR is Mendral has been designed, so it's not tied to a repo. It's actually tied to an organization today that has one or many repos. We have teams with like a gigantic mono repo, and that's fine. And usually what they do is they have this mapping inside folders and subdirectories. And then you have some teams who have lots of repos actually, and there is no mapping whatsoever from a team or a role to a repo. And Mendral doesn't care, like insights can be applied to many repos. One thing that we were working on that's actually I'm very excited about is So we have this data and that knowledge and the agent running based on events and teams asking for stuff and things appearing and background tasks and all of that. And so the agent constantly working for you and constantly looking at its data. We are building the ability for you to have your own agents on top. So basically you will have a simple way to define your own sub-agent on top of Mendral. And so it will really feel like you're giving some specific instruction, like almost a mission to Mendral. Behind the scene, in terms of architecture, it's actually a real agent. It's like a real agent that's linked to everything else. And it's a sub-agent that will be called by the main Mendral agent whenever it needs to be called. And so you'll have the ability to say, whenever there is a code change or whenever it will actually add mapping to other sources of data. It could be whenever there is a new exception on Sentry, for instance, because we are actually expanding beyond the CI logs also. I want to do X, Y, or Z. I want to do this, and I want to be notified on Slack or not, because I don't want the noise. So you'll have the ability to build your own. So I call that agent because it's de facto like a real agent. Some people might call that like agentic workflows or something, but it really depends what will be your use case. But yeah, we want to, I realized that it's actually a dream to onboard an agent that is doing work for you. And that dream is true today, actually, saying that in, not overselling the thing, but that works. That said, every team has a unique CI, right? Every time you have a unique set of tools, unique set of best practices, you're using several external services and infrastructure data that you're managing somewhere. And so all of that is unique to a team. And you cannot have an agent that will figure this out entirely. And so we're going to make the ability to plug those data and do those integration into the agents so it can actually work in a more specific way to your needs. So that's really what we are building today. And there is a lot of demand for it. Actually, two things. There is a lot of demand for customization and plugging to other data sources and other workflows. And there is another demand for having more automation. So it's very interesting to me to see, and you said it well earlier, it's interesting to me to see that people actually trust AI tools a lot today. Some people ask us, can you actually, for some of those problems, automatically open and merge the pull requests? And it's going fast.
Yeah.
So I think we get there.
Yeah, that's the trust, right? If you had, on the live stream we had a couple weeks ago, I was talking about that I don't remember the last time my coding agent locally, and I use Opus, I use Sonnet, basically any state-of-the-art model. I use GPT-5.4, I have all the subscriptions. I don't remember the last time I would have classified it as a true hallucination. It has been months, right? Now, it gets things wrong, but it's usually because I was lazy and didn't give it context, right? It just made the wrong choice because it acted like its first week as being the engineer on my team. And I blame myself for that, right? It's a me, not you problem. And so that has definitely, for me, I have certainly established more trust. I might be at that 85% level, like we keep talking about. And if I did this in CI, if I was using Mendral and, I don't have to know what models you're using on the back end, right? I just know this thing is able to give me plans reliably that I agree with. And it gives me this implementation plan to fix a problem. And I go, yep, that sounds like it's a great plan. That's exactly what I would see in a PR from a junior engineer while I'm reviewing it, right? I just happen to be reviewing this pre-pull request implementation plan. And if I did that 100 times over the first couple of months of onboarding a tool, and I never saw, or almost rarely ever saw anything wrong, and those wrong things weren't that wrong, they were just maybe a preference, I would absolutely be more trustworthy. And I can imagine myself right now in a team where if I'm onboarding an orchestration agent engine like Mendral, where I'm going to tell the team, okay, they have this new automation feature that they've just launched so that we can fully allow the AI to make the PRs and then commit them automatically. And maybe it's two different models with two different contexts that one makes it, another one reviews it, right? We've been discussing lately about how, when are we all going to be comfortable with the AI writing the software and then the different AI reviewing the software? And does it need to be a different model? Does it need a different system prompt? These are questions that are coming up actually within the guild meetings that we're having every week. And I can see myself very quickly saying, well, we're going to allow it to auto merge any linting failure because it hasn't been wrong in its implementation plan in 2 months or whatever, right? And we're going to tiptoe in with low stakes stuff. And then, maybe we can make a rule where Dependabot, this is another big pain point for me, right? When you have dozens and dozens of repos and Dependabot or Renovate comes out with a minor update, and typically it's a wonderful life if you're in a mono repo right now, because if you're in a bunch of microservice repos or you just have a sprawl of repos, one JavaScript dependency module update, and suddenly you have 20 PRs to approve, and they're all the same PR. So I don't believe that Dependabot has a just do this for me in all 20 repo mode, right? It doesn't automate that process. So then I'm literally going through and clicking. I think I'm probably at the point of comfortable with my local AI saying, hey, just use the GitHub command line tool and look through all of my repos. This would be a very long prompt, but look through all my repos for this one particular Dependabot for updating. It's got this exact title because they're all going to have the same title. And if you see that in there, go ahead and accept it and merge it with the GitHub command line tool. I do think I'm at that level. But so if I'm at that level and I'm not even the most aggressive AI person I know, like I haven't even installed OpenClaw, right? I haven't installed any of these crazy orchestration engines. I'm sure that there's lots of people that are absolutely comfortable with this. And I am all about this because there has never been a good time to tell the story of DevOps automation platforms as a thing that I can implement in a reasonable amount of time for a reasonable amount of money. Everyone that I know that's struggling with this, they don't want to entirely invest in a proprietary tool sometimes, and they want to open source everything themselves, which is the tough road ahead for anyone that's trying to do that, because I'm doing this in my courses where I'm trying to explain how to do all these AI workflows that help you do a lot of this automation. And I can tell you that tools like Mendral are the easy button versus trying to do it yourself with a bunch of more workflows that all do the things that Mendral's already doing. But we've had all these different automation engines over the years that have tried to become a market dominant force for just easing the toil on DevOps engineers. And I never feel like anyone's really cracked it. I don't go into any shop and find that they're all consistently, or a majority of them even, are using one tool beyond GitHub Actions to automate things. And very rarely do I see people with GitHub Actions. Only the most mature teams that I see in GitHub Actions are doing things where they might have a central repository of actions that are aggressively doing things on other repos in an automated way, like checking the security settings across all my org repos in order to make sure that we're not exposing a security risk by allowing, forked pull requests to automatically run actions, for example, which is one that's really biting people in the foot right now. That thing needs to be locked down on every repo, and there's no tool built in to tell you what that setting is. So you have to literally either hand code something or check it yourself or create actions that do all this automation. And it feels like we're right at the cusp of I just write either a skill for this or I have a tool that automatically does this for me. I do like this agent idea because I would like to put in a DevSecOps. That's the next one for me, where I wanted to go and actually look at these org and repo settings and report back when it finds one that's not set properly for me. Maybe something that I don't want to be a linter, but I want it to be security checks on my repos and on GitHub itself. That an engineer doesn't want to have to run that script manually every day and then do all the work of fixing the things every day. I'd rather just an AI do that because it's a binary thing. It's either this setting's checked or it's not. And if it's not checked, you need to check it. This is a very basic thing.
Yeah, there are a lot of things like that. For instance, when you start putting together some compliance, SOC 2, for instance, there are a lot of controls that you start implementing that are very important and sometimes time consuming as well. You need to have a human checking that constantly or regularly. And so, this compliance is another thing, and security in general is something that we think we can help with. You mentioned Dependabot and the noise that it causes, and we had some early prototypes of having some rules that are, when some rules are met, actually I don't even want to know about the PR, and I just merge the thing. And so,
right.
So
if it's a point release, if it's a patch release, just do it. Yeah.
Yeah, especially the build works, the CI passes, I don't want to deal with that. And so, we had some prototypes where we automated entirely some of those use cases. And I think from the feedback we're getting from our customers, people are getting there actually. They are getting ready for that. And so, very interesting. And I think very soon you'll have the ability to implement your own DevSecOps agent. And we're going to keep adding more agents ourselves too, because the magic plug and play, we like it, when you're on board, because you don't have a lot of time to evaluate another tool. So you prefer to onboard it, let it run on the side and see if it's valuable. And then if it's valuable, you want to invest more on it, which means defining your own agents. And then on top of that, we do orchestration on top of this fleet of agents. So they are called at the right time with the right context. You mentioned something also about hallucination. I think it's very interesting because I think you're right that LLMs got better recently in the last few months. And they are definitely a lot more powerful in terms of how they think and the kind of mistakes that they make. We actually built a lot of engineering around the LLM to deal with those. And so we realized that, the era of the RAG is kind of over now. Like you don't need to pull like an entire context and try to guide every single thing that the LLM should do or should consider. Instead, the prompts are getting smaller and you put a lot more intelligence in the tools themselves. And what I mean by intelligence is, for instance, in the case of Mendral, we do static analysis on the tool calls. And so we are able at runtime when the agent calls some tools to detect some drift from the initial mission. And the nice thing is you have the ability when you do that correctly with the result of the tool call to actually influence the thinking of the agent. So it's almost like the agent starts somewhere and start doing something. And then at some point he goes on the side on something, useless by calling some comments or, some things that are not actually very useful. You can actually steer it back to the plan. And so we spot those things in the tool calls and say, no, actually don't do that. Do this instead. So for the agent, it's like I'm calling a tool and it's weird because the tool is telling me to do something else. so that's really how it works. But the nice thing at the end is that you have almost a dynamic prompt. So instead of having like a very long prompt that you pass initially, you let the agent pull the context. And from that context, you can actually dynamically change that prompt at runtime. And that's really what gave us the best results. And coupling that with sub-agents, it's actually very important. Cloud Code is doing that really well too. Like when it explores your code base, it's doing that in the sub-agent because you don't need the whole context of the exploration back into the main loop. You don't need that. Once you got the results, you want just that result to be in the calls of your LLMs moving forward. And so that's also what we do. And so yeah, it's very interesting to see that like those patterns being more mature, the LLMs getting better. And I think all of that is getting closer and closer to the kind of work that a human could do for you. Yeah. And so, yeah, that's really what motivated us to start this company in the first place.
You can sort of foresee, I can imagine that you can foresee like these things are getting better at a steady pace, and it's not just the models that are getting better. We're understanding better how to, because we don't just, taking a blind model and putting it into a random situation where you need to have it write code. It's like, to me, it was like bringing a kid straight out of university who just learned how to program in that language and sitting him in the chair on day one and saying, okay, now write me some code, commit it to the, like do all these things without any context, right? We just didn't understand that we needed context. And of course we had smaller context windows. So that was also a struggle. But like for me recently, I use open code a lot more than Claude Code now. Every time I keep trying to go back to Claude Code, even though it's got some really cool things that there's not yet in open code, they're back and forth as my two favorite. And I talk about this a lot. I think I probably mention it on every show nowadays because I'm just obsessed with it all day long. But they started to integrate LSPs, which I think is leveling up the code accuracy. We don't really see it happening, but I just feel like my open code, because LSPs are in there out of the box, where with the Claude Code, I think you have to actually add the extensions manually, where open code dynamically injects it when it sees a language in real time. And I just feel like open code for me is a little bit better. And I don't have a way to prove this theory, but I think it's maybe because of that LSP background where it's constantly helping keep it on the rails, essentially, of how it's writing. And this is all, I feel like, leading us to what some of the experts out there for the last year, over a year, really. I think last year I saw a great talk from the president of, I think it was Gradle, talking about not only is AI coming for DevOps and operations because it just has to, because the software development lifecycle can't be optimized for agentic coding without the rest of the pipeline also improving. If we're going to improve 2x, the entire pipeline, the entire lifecycle has to be improved 2x. We can't just have developers tripling their PR rate and then the rest of us all act like nothing's changed. We're going to have to accelerate. We're going to have to use AI as well to accelerate, unless we're suddenly going to double the number of ops people, which I don't see any teams doing that. They're going to have to use AI. And in that premise, if we're possibly at this moment in time, if we consider these more junior engineers, not so much senior engineers in terms of their overall intelligence and accuracy, if that's the case, then we're going to need better guardrails. We're going to need more testing and more rules and more guidelines for them to follow. And then we're also going to need to remediate faster. A lot of times when people talk about remediation of failures or recovery from failures, at least in like the Kubernetes world that I live, a lot of people are talking about that from just being able to detect failures in production. But where I live is more in the CI world, and that remediation is more important to me. And I feel like that hasn't been clearly unlocked. And it feels like tools like Mendral are the way forward in that regard, in terms of they're going to help me recover from failures faster so that I can, this is all in Git. Like this entire conversation is talking about Git. Git is a protocol that allows me to undo mistakes. So if we're so apprehensive, and we sometimes in DevOps, especially in ops, we get so apprehensive about change, and we're constantly fighting one side of our brain wants to not change anything because it works right now and we're just fine with it. The other half of our brain's like, this is all needs to be better. It could be so much better. Let me fix things. Let me improve things. And that tension is just naturally in our brains. And this feels like a way for me to go faster. Also understanding that maybe it's not going to get it correct 100% of the time, but when it fails, it's also going to elevate the failures. It's also going to help me find the failures and fix them faster. So I could go faster if that means, well, that outage might be 10 minutes on that test failure. We broke a test. We fix it within 15, 20 minutes. Nobody even noticed, like we're all fine. So what's the real risk here if this thing is really just committing PRs against my infrastructure? It doesn't feel like a huge risk because I'm not having to like roll back production. I'm just rolling back a Git repo, right? At least that's how I take it. Is the stakes are actually a little lower because I'm in Git.
One thing you said actually that's very interesting is just about going faster. I heard some people telling me that the production of code has been solved and it's going to be fine. And I think it's about to be solved. Honestly, we are using a lot of AI ourselves. But I think there are some physics that are ruling the world that are not going to change, which means you can write a lot of code in parallel, but at a given time, there is only one version of your code that goes to production at a given time. And so you always need that no matter what happens, and I'm sure the software delivery is going to change. We're going to participate to that change. It has to change. That's for sure. Like when you even just take detail, but when you look at how PRs are being reviewed today, like you realize that maybe it's not the right paradigm. It should be done differently or possibly with different tools actually. But in any way,
we used to do human Q&A, by the way. Q&A,
exactly.
QA. Like we used to do human QA. Now, if you're doing human QA, you're legacy. Like
yeah.
This
exactly, but you still need that's actually a very good example because you still need to do some QA, right? It's automated, you still need to do it. And I think the same thing happens with software delivery. At a given time, you need an integration loop that's going to make sure that you can actually ship the one single version of your software at a given time. And you don't have this constraint when you publish code, thanks to Git, actually. And you can open any branch, any PR, anything. But you still need to integrate them at some point. And I think that's going to stay. And so even though all the processes and the way people work is going to be different, but so that's actually very interesting to hear in terms of going faster and what are all the things needed to go faster. It's not just about writing the code.
Let me ask you real quick on a very specific subject. Our friend Victor Farsik, you might know him, Docker Captain alumni and YouTuber who has been doing a lot of AI videos over the last year. We had a conversation recently where he believes, and I totally agree with this statement, that the harness, our local harness, whether that's Claude Code or Open Code or Copilot and VS Code or however you want to roll, that's going to be the way that not just devs, but maybe DevOps and operators and platform engineers and SREs, this is going to be like our window to the world. And the more we can give stuff context into it, the more we can give it. I just learned yesterday from another DevOps engineer that's making his own, he has his own skills essentially. He's not using skills for this particular thing yet, but he's creating a me skill. And that's how I'm envisioning this. And I'm going to practice this in the next week and see if it helps. There's a rising theory that we shouldn't be telling the AI, hey, you need to be an expert marketer. You need to be in this role, you need to be an expert SRE. But it's more important that we tell it about us and how we work and what we expect, rather than tell it what it is. And so one of these engineers in the guild was saying that he's had a lot better output of his LLM by describing himself. And I think he injects it as a command or something in his harness. I see that as more of a skill. that I just need to flood into each conversation at some point so that every session, the AI knows more about me and my role and how I want to operate. And so coming back to Victor feels like this harness that eventually will know us personally better. It will have maybe more docs from the team. It'll have more access to Confluence or Jira or Notion or whatever you might have that gives it more context about the environment. So thus, that seems to be the best way forward for interacting with all of our systems, not just our code, as the theory has. I think this feels like a pattern, a thing that I want. Do you see Mendral as being something rather than in Slack is the primary chat interface? Obviously there's this great dashboard. It's probably going to always have the dashboard. I don't gravitate to Slack right now. Like I'm not someone who jumps into Slack to have a conversation with AI. I always think about it being in my harness. Do you see it being like an MCP or an A2A? I mean, I don't really understand exactly how agents talk to each other. I don't actually currently have any of my own. What does that future look like for Mendral?
Yeah, so definitely it's a very interesting topic. And so short answer is yes. Yes, I do also have a single interface, and I constantly tweak it and improve it and customize it to my profile, my needs, my skills, all of that. And so yes, and today Mendral has a lot of knowledge and is building a lot of fairly large context at a given time about your setup, your software delivery. And we started to get people asking us, hey, can I use that knowledge locally? Because we're actually doing a lot of things locally. I mentioned software delivery is going to change. And I think one of the biggest change that's going to happen in CI/CD is a lot more things will be done locally on the machine. That's for sure. And so, starting with the reviews of code, like Entropic release, and there are more and more people doing reviews locally before they land on GitHub. And I think that's only the beginning. And I think eventually we can expect the code to land on your CI to be more and more perfect because there is a lot more thinking and calls and back and forth happening on your local machine. And so, yes, indeed, we want Mendral to be available locally. So it can be included entirely with the way you do work already, and also bring this knowledge before it lands on CI. It kind of sucks today that every time there is this big surprise that happens when you have to kick in a CI runner to verify certain things that you cannot verify otherwise. I think that needs to change. And so, yes, in terms of...
Hence Dagger, right?
Yeah, right.
This is why you're working on Dagger for 7 years. Yeah,
exactly. That's exactly right. And in terms of implementation, you mentioned MCP, A2A. I think where most people are moving right now is by having really good, well-documented CLIs. Because again, LLMs actually perform like the human brain, not at the same level, but it's very similar in the way it thinks. And so, do you think your software engineer would behave better with an API and MCP server or with a great CLI? And when you look at cloud and skills, it actually works much better by using CLIs. And so I think MCP is good for certain things, but I see it exactly the same as an API. API, MCP, same thing. It actually works better usually when you have remote MCP servers, but the remote API or remote MCP server at the end of the day, it's not very different. And so I think the best way to integrate with some of those APIs is to have a really good CLI that your harness, as you said, can integrate with. And so that's what we're planning to do eventually, is to have a nice CLI that gives you all the capabilities as you could get on Slack or the dashboard. Those are just front end to the engine that we run on the back end. So yeah, the short answer, yes. And I'm glad you asked, because I think it shows also that you're pretty advanced with your own harness, because not a lot of people are not like that today. Sometimes it feels when we're talking to each other, we're like, yeah, of course, it's obvious, you need to improve your skills, your customization, your profile. And I do that too. It's just that there are so many people out there who are still figuring out what they should do with AI.
Well, and the reality is that 6 months ago, I knew none of this, right? We didn't even have skills until 6 months ago. Like there's just... Yeah, there is so much, and the only reason I think any team that is in our sort of level of maturity or beyond is getting productive is because the AI is doing the work. Like we're so consumed with having to learn patterns. I'm reading constantly. I've had to adopt Readwise Reader in the last year as a critical part of my learning workflow, where I just dump every tweet, every blog post, every YouTube that I think is interesting around AI that I think I probably can consume. I throw it in shout out to Readwise Reader. Readwise is the company and the product. Reader is the app that you can consume all these different types of media in one place, and I can have it summarized. I can tag it. I can do all these great things with it. It's kind of like, to me, the graduation of the old Feedly or the Google Reader or the RSS readers that we used to have. But it's kind of becoming like my podcasting YouTube player at this point too. Instead of using the algorithms, I just dump things into it that I think are interesting from the algorithm. And then when I want to be focused and learn, I go there. So that's like a hack for me to keep up because, well, and nobody's keeping up. Like, this is crazy time. It's insanity. No one can actually know it all. No one's an expert yet. So it's exciting to see that because, like, do you know specifically how we would implement that in terms of me having a Claude code in front of me? How would that talk to Mendral? Like, getting into your architecture for a second. Is that an A2A? I'm not smart enough to know. Is A2A the thing that would allow my agent to somehow talk to like an API on your system that has an agent? Do you know anything about this stuff?
So what I mean by a CLI is, I think a good example of that would be, look at the difference when you use either open code or Claude code or even Cursor. Like, look at the difference of interacting with GitHub with, on one side, GitHub MCP, which is actually quite good. And on the other side, the GHCLI. I don't know if you tried both actually, but I invite you to do it. You'll see that there is a huge difference between the two. Basically, TLDR is one works really well, the other is a bit clunky. I'll let you guess which one.
Okay.
And so the CLI is great because when you look at the agent session and how it navigates the CLI, it basically reads the help. It requires your CLI to have really good error messages, so the agent can actually react from it. Basically, it's the same thing. Like, your CLI needs to be intuitive, so a human can use it. If a human can use it well without much documentation, it means an LLM would use it pretty well because it can read those messages and can interact with the CLI. And so, we got a lot more success with really good CLIs when we integrate with services than anything else. And then it's obviously our job for Mendral to make it work well, with our API and the CLI, but for the user and for both the user and the agent, your local agent, like, it doesn't matter. The CLI, as the CLI works well, is able to expose the right context, is able to grab the right input and output and have the right integration. All of that is obviously complex, but it's the problem of the person building the CLI and the API behind. So I wouldn't think too much about the best way to integrate. Like, you can actually write a skill that says, hey, you have the CLI X, and the purpose of using that CLI is to do this. Give it some context. That's it. The integration is done, and it will work much, much better than any MCP server.
Yeah, I just realized while you're saying that, maybe a question I should start asking products that are on this Agentic DevOps podcast is, are you prepared for the AI to sign up and use your tool versus the human?
Exactly.
Because now we have Stripe doing this. We have people booking their planes with AI and OpenClaw doing all this. And I'm wondering, for companies that are built in the AI era and they're actually using AI and they're just like AI centric, right? Are they also presumably thinking, well, let's see how far Claude Code can get just signing up and using the tool and implementing our preferences, since presumably your local harness knows more about you and your infrastructure than Mendral does on day one, at least. Is that a usage scenario that you're considering?
Yeah, and I think that's, there are even startups right now, like, I think there were a few in our YC batch that are specialized in giving access, like, to all the services out there, like booking a flight or anything, giving it access to agent harnesses. So for instance, creating actually a CLI on an MCP server to interact with some of the services that today are only accessible through a dashboard and some clunky UX. So I think the web of tomorrow is going to be agentic, and it's very interesting because it's not so important anymore to make an interface that's really good, beautiful for humans, but it's more important that it's ergonomic to an agent. Yeah. So definitely. Right now for us specifically, Mendral is giving you like a turnkey solution in a few clicks, but I realized that the integrations with other agents is going to be key moving forward, because what everyone wants is not a single agent, it's actually a team of agents. So even when you use Claude Code, you are actually already using several agents underneath locally on your machine. And when you call to remote services, you already have a team of agents, with some agents running on your machine, some other agents running remotely. And I think that's the future. That's what people want.
Yeah. All right. We're going to do some rapid fires real quick. But before that, I think I have one more question on the future of Mendral. Like, we've been talking about GitHub, not everybody that listens to this podcast is maybe using GitHub. We even got some people, I'm hearing news recently that some teams are leaving GitHub for various reasons. Are you, like, where do you see going out the rest of 2026? Do you have plans for other tooling, other platforms, anything like that? Like,
we're already working on some of it. Yeah, we started to work with bigger companies lately and realized that some of them have different CI needs, things like we got questions for Circle CI, build guides. So yeah, we're going to support them. The Mendral today is, we talk a lot about GitHub because I would say based on what we see from people, it's probably 80% of the demand at least. So it's quite big still, but I do agree that it's going to disappear over time or at least reduce. For me, GitHub is more like a protocol nowadays.
Yeah.
Because when you look at bringing a GitHub app that replaces GitHub Actions with another CI system, or even replace the GitHub Action runners, or bring another review tool on top. Some people migrated to linear instead of GitHub issues. So yeah, everyone is grabbing a piece of GitHub and integrating with GitHub because they have to. So it became more like an integration protocol than anything else. And so we have to follow that. And so we made Mendral CI agnostic by design from an architecture point of view. We haven't built other integrations yet because there is still a high demand for GitHub Actions, but it's going to come.
Yeah. I secretly wish that they would just open source the non-open source parts, the API essentially for GitHub Actions. Yeah. That way we can have local runner, like we can do this all locally. We can still, I feel like at some point the automation engine behind GitHub Actions is just going to be commodity. And I'm looking forward to that future because we do have all these rough edges. It does feel like a very low level raw tool to me. But I absolutely love it. I use it every day. I make money by selling courses on it and stuff. So I obviously love it. It's just, there's a lot there that could be improved. And, they would need another 100 engineers on that actions team to move at the pace that I think it needs right now in AI. I mean, you talk about this as like, we need these other tools. There's like a future with these other things. And even GitHub's former own CEO is left, started a new company, funded, I think, $60 million by Microsoft, or at least partly by Microsoft, to help solve this agentic coding problem. They sound like they're going to be a layer on top of GitHub, which again, makes me feel like GitHub's becoming like a cloud provider in a sense, just for code, because they already have been, but they're just going to be this thing that we maybe don't touch that much, and that lots of people are using things on top of it, but don't ever actually have to go there because the AI is the one submitting, I don't type Git commands anymore, right? There's so much I don't do. And the only reason I think I'm even still going to GitHub is because one, habit, like I got a lot of bad old habits to break. I've got a lot of things that I should be asking my local agent to do or look at or go find out that I'm manually doing, and I don't know why. Feels like I need to sometimes just break myself the habit and see how far I can go in the day without ever actually going to the GitHub website. Because you're right, like the GitHub CLI is doing a lot more. And now, even now we have the Gmail CLI, like Google Workspace launched recently a CLI, so you can access all of these workspace tools, Google Docs, Google Gmail, Google Drive, and all that stuff from a CLI. So yeah, the CLI Future I feel like is strong, and I'm here for all of that because one of my favorite things to use Go for is to make CLIs for solving my own little problems. And I've already got, like most of us, I think, probably half a dozen local projects that I'm just making CLIs for my own use to feed back to the AI to do things for me. So it's just a fun time. We could talk forever. I love talking to you about this platform. But a couple of quick fires for the audience. I think I'm going to need to start putting these in my show, just to start asking engineers that are on the show. Current favorite harness?
Oh, I use Cloud Code a lot, actually, for even more than code. Yeah.
Okay.
I start to customize it for automating some of my non-technical work too, actually.
Okay. Are you into like the new dispatch and the computer use yet? Is that like for personal stuff or for things that aren't necessarily code? Are you leaning into some of the cloud stuff with Claude?
So usually I use a combination of a couple of things. I like a lot of the Anthropic products. And so I use Cloud Code, the CLI, locally for most of the code. I started to automate a lot of my code borrowing work, even with Cloud Code and some integrations locally. And so I maintain like a catalog of skills, of personal skills that I use to automate some of my job. The problem with Cloud Code is that it's very specific to code also. So I'm aware of that. And so sometimes I go to Cloud Desktop, which I think has a lot of, a way of managing the context that it's entirely different. The way it manages memory and context is very different. So I like Cloud Desktop. I do not like Cloud Core work, actually. That's some of the things that people start talking about and like. I do not like it because I think it's not as advanced as Cloud Code in terms of context management and multi-agents and all of that. I think it will get there eventually.
Yeah.
And then I started lately, and that one might make you laugh, but it's kind of weird. I started to use the Cloud Code iOS app, the Cloud app that has a code tab or something. You have a kind of a tiny version of Cloud Code inside your mobile, and it's using sandboxes. And so I started to use that to make some very simple PRs on a repo. I use that only for very simple stuff, like, I need to update that on the landing page or something. I do that from my phone. And that's kind of scary because it actually works quite well for simple stuff. So it's almost like a preview of what we're going to be able to do tomorrow, like almost like talk to your phone or something and work happens and code gets pushed to prod.
Yeah. I feel like we're so close to, the Tony Stark, Iron Man,
exactly,
Jarvis. I feel like we're getting so close, at least for developers. Like, I feel like we're the first wave of really the people that are onboarding with this. I went and saw last night, for the third time in 2 weeks, I went and saw the movie Project Hail Mary because I read the book. My wife and I loved it. We're big Andy Weir fans. And this new movie is amazing and perfect. And Ryan Gosling is fantastic. And we sat next to some people that were really, really into it. And so we started talking after the fact in the movie theater. I'm the kind of person that loves a full movie theater. I think the reason you go to movies is to share the experience with other people. So the guy next to me leans over at the end and says, we start talking about the movie and how it's a positive view of the future where the world's actually collaborating and working together to solve esoteric problems. And he said that there's this subreddit he's a fan of called, I think it's called Humanity Hell Yeah or Humans Hell Yeah or something like that. That's like a post-war look at the future of civilization where we all tend to agree on that and we're solving bigger problems, we're dealing with aliens or whatever, and then we all just hold hands. And so we start talking back and forth, and I get home and I'm walking the dog and I want to know more about this subreddit. So I'm in the OpenAI app and the ChatGPT app essentially, and I'm having a speaker conversation in the audio mode, and I'm just talking back and forth with the AI, and I'm living a little bit of an urban area, so there's other people walking their dogs. And I'm realizing that people around me are hearing someone, I sound like the old guy on speakerphone, walking around talking to someone on speakerphone, but I'm actually just talking to an AI about a subreddit and sci-fi. And I'm realizing that I'm walking my dog and I'm way more advanced than everyone around me. I'm like doing things that are sci-fi level future where I'm talking to a robot, but also I look like grandpa talking to someone on a phone on speakerphone that's way too loud. It's like really weird scenario. So I feel the same way. Like, I think these things are all happening so fast and it's very cool to do. Okay, last question. I'm assuming you're using Opus a lot. Is that you Opus 4.6 person or are you Open 4.5 person? There's some people that didn't jump into 4.6.
I like Opus 4.6, but I'm actually not using it for everything. I'm a big believer of the right model for the right task. Mendral also is this way. We use the 3 Anthropic models today, and we're going to move multi-providers soon too. Because I believe there are models that are really good for certain things. Opus is really good for complex reasoning, but it's also very slow. And sometimes you don't need to that. If you summarize an email or something, or like if you want to rewrite some things that you wrote. So yeah, but I'd say if I have to pick one, yes, that would be my go-to. But yeah, usually got to be multimodal based on what I'm doing.
Nice. Thank you so much, Sam, for being here. We could talk for another hour. People are already going to go, Bret, like you can't keep having these multi-hour podcast episodes, but I feel like there's so much to talk about. And it's great to actually talk to not just founders, but engineers in the thick of it that are also living and drinking the Silicon Valley Kool-Aid a little bit. It's great to see the different levels, or I guess maturity levels of everyone that we have on the show, and to see where everyone is at. And it's always fun to have people on the show that are ahead of us. And I feel like, touching the AI even closer to what we think is the utopia of this Star Trek future, I feel like we're in. So I'm excited that you guys are progressing so quickly on the product, and I'm looking forward to using more of it, especially since it scratches an itch for me. I'm looking forward to having you back on the show maybe later this year and talking through some of the advancements. We'll probably have new models by then. Supposedly Claude's going to have this new model later this year. We'll see whether it lives up to the hype, but it'll be interesting to see what you can do with some of the new stuff that's coming out.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the opportunity to share all of that, and very, very cool. It didn't feel like a long time at all.
I'm glad. So yeah, you can find Mendral at mendral.com, mendral.com. Well, thanks again, man. Thanks for joining us, and I'll see you in the next episode.